Good. Hi, good morning, co-banker George. Welcome to the risk management today. We are so fortunate to have our corporate counsel Brian Smith to come in for the second time in 6 months to give us this risk management seminar. Last time, actually, he was here about 3 months ago, but there's a lot of questions about fiduciary duties and frauds, and he didn't have time to finish all that. So it's so nice to come back for the second time, and he's going to touch on those topics as well as the RPA, the new RPAs. So and as you know, that Brian Smith is, everybody know. Brian Smith has been with us for many years already. So I'm going to skip the detailed introduction. Suffice to say that Brian Brian is a very experienced litigation lawyer, very down to earth and very knowledgeable, very actually amicable, and sometimes very humorous, entertaining. So with that, let's welcome Brian Smith. Brian, go ahead.
Okay, so thank you, Peter. Thank you. I'm always happy to be here. And I mean, so defending real estate agents, keeping the real estate agents out of trouble, helping them have their transactions closed smoothly. That's what I do every day. So I'm here to, give you some tips, some guidance on just that, closing your transactions smoothly without issues coming up in them. When I came 3 months ago, I talked a lot about disclosures, fiduciary duties. I'm going to be talking about that today also, but really also focusing on the tying that into the residential purchase agreement, the new residential purchase agreement. It's almost not new by now. It's been around for 2 years, but we still call it the new residential purchase agreement because it's not, it's not the one that we've had for years. And the disclosure responsibilities, the fiduciary duties, they actually they come up in the way that you prepare the residential purchase agreement, the way you advise your clients regarding the residential purchase agreement. I've got an outline here in a hard copy for the folks who are with us. I've got it on the screen. I'll keep moving through it, and just bear with me if I have a little cough. I had this cold a few weeks ago. That is gone, but I still have this cough that is staying with me. So hopefully it'll be quiet for the next hour, and I'll get through talking with you about the residential purchase agreement here. The cornerstone document in your transactions. And thinking back to when I was here in April, I have to kind of go over something that we talked about getting in as a question was, what if you get a transaction where the other side is giving you a contract, a purchase agreement, which is not the CAR residential purchase agreement. It is, it's typed up on Microsoft Word. It's not on the form from the Association of Realtors. If you have your counterpart, buyer's agent, provide you a contract, an offer, which is not on the CAR form, please tell them that it has to be on the CAR form for your offer for your seller to consider accepting it. So I had a conversation with an agent on Monday regarding a demand letter that he received. He was the listing agent, and he had just the property had been in escrow 2 years ago. It's actually, we kind of think of it as it's more of like a castle, this house. It's 15,000 square feet. It is in North San Diego County, Carlsbad. It's on 4 acres, and it looks like it's going to go into a lawsuit. Just some highlights of what he was dealing with is that, so he was listing agent. There was buyer's agent, but buyer's agent told him, actually for preparing the contract, I'm going to have you talk with this other person, Sandra. Sandra contacts him and she is licensed as a real estate broker and an attorney. She's on a law firm's website. She's a practicing attorney. So you have you have listing agent who's, a good real estate agent, but he's not an attorney, and he is emailing, talking, negotiating the terms of the residential purchase agreement with someone who is an attorney. She's kind of saying, well, I'm a broker, I'm also an attorney, but it's tricky on her end to be, wearing both hats. So he was negotiating with someone who's actually an attorney. So first point, if you are in that situation, if your counterpart, your buyer's agent, is giving you that offer, or if it's the listing agent, if the person on the other side of the transaction who you're dealing with is an attorney, and they're saying, oh, we'll work this out, just look at this term, we'll draft it like this, I'll draft it like that. If the other person is an attorney, it can be in addition to a real estate agent and attorney. Talk with Peter about that. Don't just be negotiating with an attorney. And Peter can help you with this. So that's a talk with Peter situation right there. And the other, I say talk with Peter situation is, the more you're getting away from the form standard terms of the residential purchase agreement and drafting addendums that are lengthy. The CAR addendum, it has space to add terms that might be added. And maybe you add in 2 sentences that says, investigation contingency is extended until the second termite report is provided, something like that. But if you're filling up the entire addendum form with this is extended 30 days, this is extended 10 days, but only if this, but only if that, and buyer has a right to cancel in this situation, buyer has a right to cancel in this situation. If you are filling up that addendum with, beyond 2 or 3 sentences, that's also a talk with Peter situation, because then you are actually drafting the contract, and that's how you get into these problematic situations. So what happened in this case, I'm getting into it now. And I had the call with the agent on Monday. So the attorney who was negotiating for the buyer, she said, of course you have your contingencies, right? Every transaction you have your contingencies. This attorney representing the buyer, she said, well, we're going to do this addendum that says contingencies do not start to run until seller provides all disclosures. Well, your residential purchase agreement says at paragraph 3, it's at paragraph 3L. I have some extra RPAs here if anybody even wants to look on. Your residential purchase agreement that CAR prepared says contingencies start, after acceptance, at acceptance. It doesn't create this, some lack of clarity as to when contingencies start. But okay, seller provides disclosures, that's when contingencies start. That's okay. I could see that. But then what happened was it became unclear as what did the buyer really mean by the disclosures, because this is a 4-acre property with 15,000 square feet. There could be a lot of things to disclose, right? So what does disclosures mean? Does that mean I give you a TDS and SPQ with all the boxes checked, yes or no, and some explanations in there? Or does it mean I give you the TDS and SPQ, and in that one explanation it said, you check yes, in explanation you put there was a leak 2 years ago, see attached leak detection report. Okay, so you provide the TDS and SPQ, you think you provide the disclosures, but you don't have the leak detection report. You email your disclosures to the buyer's agent, and you say, here's our disclosures. The leak detection report will follow when the seller's out of town today. I should be able to give you the leak detection report within 3 days. Okay, fair enough. But in this situation, because the disclosure, the contingencies didn't start until the disclosures were provided, the buyer's side, this attorney, interpreted that to mean that the disclosures had not been provided. So if you get into that, and that's, and this goes back to what I just said, the more detailed the addendum becomes, talk with Peter. This is I actually found it really interesting what the buyer wanted to disclose on this property was 4 acres. It had a koi fish pond. The buyer wanted in the disclosures, count up all the koi fish in the pond and their weight. Give me that as a disclosure. The property has an orchard. Do an inventory of all the trees in the orchard and provide that to me as a disclosure. So I actually hadn't seen that before. I thought that was very interesting. Give me the number of koi fish in the pond and the weight of them. That's really interesting. But that's that this buyer was very aggressive. I'll say difficult. He had an attorney, but this level of scrutiny is what you get into when you're dealing with someone on the other side who is an agent, licensed agent, and an attorney. So, again, that's a talk with Peter situation. Your residential purchase agreement, just remember there's the residential, there's the income property purchase agreement, there's the vacant land purchase agreement. They differ slightly. So probably, the majority of your transactions are the single family residence, the residential purchase agreement, but once in a while you sell some vacant land, use the vacant land purchase agreement. Like I've gotten the outline, provide your agency disclosure to the buyer before you make your offer. I see that happen. You're busy, everybody's busy, I get it. So you say, hey, let's make the offer, or you say to yourself, we'll make the offer. If it gets accepted, then I'll take the time to fill out my agency disclosure and give it to you, buyer. That's really not the way it's supposed to be done. Providing the offer, and this goes to disclosures also, providing them to your client. Talk with your client before you provide documents about how they want to receive them. Do you want to receive them? Do you want me to come over and sit with you at the kitchen table? Do you want me to email them to you? Is DocuSign okay with you? The DocuSign is great. I like it. I mean, this is what when I bought my house, and when I see this in transactions, I like to just email it to your clients as a PDF. Take a look at this. If it's okay, then I'll put it in the DocuSign to you. The new residential purchase agreement, that paragraph 3, it's a summary or a checklist of all the terms. You can see at 3 around 3L, it has the contingencies, loan, appraisal, investigation contingency, and it allows you to set the time period for those contingencies. The contract terms, what's your offer going to be for? I think it's always wise to have your offer, or on the seller side, have your listing price be based on a market analysis, meaning be based on comparables in the neighborhood. So what are other properties in the neighborhood selling for? And it means you actually get the data, get a document, get an MLS ad, get something from Zillow, download it, and email it to your client, email it to your buyer. Hey, the house 2 streets away sold for 1.1 million. The house on the same street at 4250 Edgerton Avenue sold for 950,000. I think you should list yours at $1,050,000. Actually email those comparables to your client so they have them in their file, and then if the question comes up later as to, well, why do you listed that this price, you documented it. You don't necessarily have to review them with your client, but if you have an email where you've sent it to your client, that's protection for you. Going through my outline, 30 days escrow typical. I mean, I hope that's what most of you are sending your escrows out. So what are the situations where you would do a quicker escrow? Well, if your buyer is a flipper, your buyer is, simply going to tear down the house and rebuild it. In that situation, your buyer doesn't, you know, the disclosures and the condition of the house are not important to your buyer. So that would be a situation where an escrow of less than 30 days would be acceptable. But, you know, in most of you, you know, representing someone buying their home that they're going to live in, I don't see a reason why your escrow should be less than 30 days. It kind of jams things up. It creates a tighter period for inspections, creates a tighter period for getting your loan. So I think you need to have, you know, a strong and clear reason as to why your escrow should be less than 30 days. Like you're representing a developer who's just going to, you know, tear down the house and build a new house. How, you know, the seller to respond to your offer 3 days is typical, but you could tell your seller, I need your response in 2 days. The deposit. You know, they call it the initial deposit, they call it the earnest money deposit. What is the purpose of this deposit? So the purpose of the deposit is one, to scrolling down through my outline for the folks online. Well, it's one to show that your buyer has, you know, financial ability. They have some skin in the game. They can put up that 50, 60, or 70,000 within 3 days. That indicates, you know, they're a viable buyer. But two, also, if for some reason your buyer backs out of the contract, or I actually have to say breaches the contract, and your seller goes and finds another buyer, possibly, you know, in a market, you know, varying offers, possibly the seller they'll get another offer, but it's not going to be the same amount. Maybe it's less. And then that 3%, it compensates the seller for that small loss that he or she obtains in going to find another buyer. You know, it takes them another week to find the other buyer. It's $20,000 less. There's more escrow fees. There's just more work for the seller to do. So that's the purpose of it. The 3%. So what if you get the offer that comes in and it says that you offer 3%, and then your seller comes back and said, your buyer's agent, you offer 3% deposit, your listing agent comes back and says counter offer, it's got to be 10%. I mean, I think when the other side starts haggling with you over more than 3%, that's a red flag for a transaction that is going to have headaches for you and your client. And, you know, possibly lead to a cancellation, possibly lead to a lawsuit, just a transaction that isn't worth proceeding with. So maybe they want 4%, 5%. Again, beyond 3%, you need to really see that they're working in good faith. There really needs to be a compelling reason. I think asking for more than 3% is a red flag for you as a real estate agent. The liquidated damages, it's called liquidated damages, you know, meaning that if your buyer breaches, those are damages that goes to the seller. So if the seller, you know, if the seller gets to keep the deposit, then it's considered a form of damages, like agreed to damages that the seller gets. It's in paragraph 5 and 29 of the purchase agreement. And the more important paragraph here is paragraph 29 in the new residential purchase agreement. And that is the one that seller and buyer initial regarding how is the deposit to be handled. And this is the paragraph that says that if the buyer is in default, meaning if the buyer breaches the agreement, the seller gets to, well, escrow has this deposit, first of all. So at that point, then escrow can release the deposit to the seller as a form of damages. But this only can happen if seller and buyer initial paragraph 29. So, and I had a case, it continued for about the deposit, the buyer's deposit sat in escrow for over 3 years. The reason it did is because the agent, before the purchase, I mean, to open escrow, you have to take your residential purchase agreement, take it over to the scanner, scan it in, attach it to your email and say, hi, escrow, glad to be working with you again. We're ready to open up another transaction. Here's the residential purchase agreement. I've copied the other agent here, and let's open up this escrow. But before the agent did that, he didn't check the document to see that buyer and seller had signed it. And he actually, most importantly, he didn't check, he didn't confirm, he didn't take a look at paragraph 29, and only the buyer had initialed, not the seller. The seller forgot to initial it. Only one side initialed it, so it became a dispute. What on earth happens with this 3%? This was a valuable property, so there's $100,000 sitting in escrow, and the governing document is not initialed. So it's prudent, it's appropriate before you send your purchase agreement into escrow, especially in the world of everybody signing electronically on their phone. Just page through it. Okay, yeah, at the last page, seller and buyer have signed, and in all the places where they're supposed to initial, on each page, and also paragraph 31 arbitration, everywhere they're supposed to initial, seller and buyer have initial. But the most important one is 29. If there's one part of it where they've got to initial, it's 29, because that's what controls the deposit. And again, the escrow can't release the deposit unless buyer and seller give mutual instructions. And okay, so looking at my outline again, and most of your transactions, it's purchasing a single family residence. The buyer has to get a loan. Maybe some of them it's all cash, but I think the majority of your transactions, buyers getting a loan. So like what I've got here in paragraph 5, and referring to, that's 5C, excuse me, of the residential purchase agreement. And this is, and I think I talked about this in April. We call it staying in your lane. It is, it's okay to say, I think you'll qualify for a loan. Talk with Susie, she's the loan broker. Here's her phone number. But it's not okay to say, you'll qualify for a loan. It'll be for this amount at this term, and I'm sure you'll get it. You'd say, yeah, I think you'll get it, but you need to talk with Susie. She's the loan broker. So don't advise on the ability to qualify for the loan or the terms of the loan. And what goes with that is have your buyer be in the qualification process before they make the loan, before they make the offer. Excuse me. What relates to this is, I call it, don't exaggerate your buyer's financial abilities to the listing agent. So it's okay to say, my buyer is well qualified. He can purchase this property. Him and his family wrote up this letter where it has their picture. They wrote, we're looking to buy our first house. The school is nearby. Here's a picture of us with the kids. Like their marketing of their letter that presents themselves. It doesn't relate to finances. And here's his proof of funds for the transaction to show that he can, he can pay. Well, if it's all cash, that's especially important. But you know, he can pay what will not be covered by the loan. But what if you say that, oh, my buyer is a heart surgeon at UCLA, he makes $500,000 a year. It sounds great to hear that. And your listing agent's going to love to hear that. And that may help you get the transaction moving. But is that really a wise thing to say from a risk management point of view? No, that's not the way you should say it. So my buyer is well qualified. Here's the proof of funds. Okay. My buyer is a heart surgeon at UCLA. He makes $500,000 a year. No, because you don't really know what he makes. And as a fiduciary, one of your duties is confidentiality. So you do have to talk about your buyer to be able to move the transaction ahead. But what his exact salary is, that's confidential information. You want to have something in writing from your buyer that says, you know, yes, Brian, it's okay to tell them I make $400,000 a year, or that he's a heart surgeon at UCLA. You want to have something that, I mean, these things may come out, but I've seen this come up in cases where, you know, people are getting angry and they look for little things that were shared and they claim it was confidential. So just go with, he's well qualified. Here's the proof of funds, here's the letter from him and his wife, and stick with that. The other thing yes.
It's okay to disclose publicly known information about buyer, right? For example, he's a medical doctor. You can say that, right?
I mean, if it's that's a good way of looking at it. Yes, Peter. So it's publicly available. Yes. So that can be disclosed, but you know what his salary is, that's not public information. I would still stick with the first step of he's well qualified, here's the proof of funds. Then they ask, so disclose what he does for a living when you're asked about it, you know, rather than just volunteering it at first. So then they say, wow, that's great. What does he do for a living? Then you can say, well, he's a doctor at UCLA. And that's going to be on their webpage. But I still would wait for the specific inquiry on it. Proof of funds, make it a bank statement with the buyer's name and address on it rather than the screenshot from the phone, because the screenshot from the phone just shows the account number and $520,000 in the account, and then it's possible that your listing agent says, well, how do I really know this is from Joe, your buyers? So it's the better practice to have it be a bank statement that shows the name. And well, at least at my bank I can get those online. I think if you do some planning, you could get copies of those so you could actually provide them to the listing agent. The contingencies under the contract, those are shown in the summary under paragraph 3. And of course, under 3L, you see loan contingency, appraisal contingency, investigation contingency. Excuse me. The time periods for those contingencies. I mean, as the buyer, you want your offer to be attractive, so you want shorter contingencies for the seller. But what's a reasonable length of time? What's a fair length of time for an investigation contingency? Is it 15 days? You probably don't need that much. Is it 5 days? That's probably too short. I mean, what I recommend is 10 days. And remember, you've got to do your general inspection, termite. Maybe it's a mold inspection. Maybe they're doing that sewer camera inspection. Maybe they're doing the chimney inspection. Possibly during the inspections, you find something that needs some more attention. You find that, like you were asking me about that crack. I was having a conversation with one of the agents just before I started about, a crack on the wall. And You know, the crack we were talking about, it sounded very minor. So I said, put it on your Avid, but maybe it looks like it's more of a structural crack and you want to have a contractor come and look at it. I mean, that's not going to happen in 5 days. But, you know, 10 days, I think that's reasonable. And you can request an extension of the 10-day period. You know, I think when I purchased my house, I think the home inspector, from the date he came out there to the date he emailed me the report, it was 3 days. I mean, I'm, you know, not sure what you folks are seeing in terms of, so from when the inspector's at the property to when they email that nice report to you, how long is it taking? 2 days? 2 days, yeah. Okay. I don't think they can do it in 24 hours. I think it's 2 days. Some of them could take 3 days, but I think, you know, 48 hours, 2 days, I think that's fair. You know, however, if you set your investigation contingency at 7 days, your buyer has a job, your buyer has kids, you know, you're kind of pushing things there. So I still think, you know, 10 days is the best inspection period. Remember, you got to review that report. It's like 60 pages. And, you know, many of my cases relate to what's in those reports and did the buyer actually review it? Excuse me. The contingency removal, let me go to this paragraph 7 here of my outline. And that relates to the contingencies, which of course are in paragraph 8 of your residential purchase agreement. It's the time period in the contract to cancel or to move ahead with the contract. You know, I had a case where the issue was the contingency removed, and the interesting thing was that the seller, he actually took the position that the contingency had been removed, but it had just been removed by sending an email. So with removing contingencies, remember there is a CAR form for that. It's a contingency removal form. A conversation, a text message does not remove a contingency. Even an email, even a very formal email with, you know, underlines and bold, that does not remove the contingency. I mean, you can send the email, but your email needs to have attached to it as you know, as that PDF file attached to your email needs to have the contingency removal form attached to it. That's the only way to remove a contingency. The contingency period, it can be extended, but it has to be by mutual agreement. And you know, that really just comes down to what's the reasonableness of your extension request. If you're, you know, asking for the extension because your lender still hasn't approved your loan, that's reasonable. But you know, if you're asking for the extension because you know you're on your you submitted your offer the day before you went on your European vacation, that you know I have cases like that. You know, people think they can buy a house while they're on vacation. They're just, oh, I'll have my cousin walk through and I'll have my agent walk through for me. You know, that's not, I would be bothered if I got the request for extension in that situation. And I also have a case where, remember, the agent was not present for the inspections. So that's another thing to keep in mind. When you do the inspections, please be there. Please be there yourself. And you know, you can try to get all the inspections done in one day. The home inspector, the mold inspector, the guy who runs the sewer camera, you can hopefully schedule those for one day. But you know, it's worthwhile for you to, you know, postpone your vacation a short period of time so you're actually present for the inspection. Okay, so moving into cancellations here. Well, seller wants to cancel. Why would a seller want to cancel? There's some common situations for seller to cancel. Well, buyer doesn't put the deposit into escrow. The buyer does not remove the loan contingency, an investigation contingency, or another contingency. That is in, excuse me, paragraph 14 of your new residential purchase agreement. And the thing to keep in mind with a cancellation is that before doing so, you have to give a notice to perform. You know, again, that is a form. I brought some copies here if anyone who's with us wants to take a look at them. You know, it's a form that has to be given if, you know, seller, you're canceling because your buyer hasn't removed the loan contingency, or you haven't given a notice to perform, you're really not following the contract.
Brian,
Yes.
if it's in the scenario where, where the buyer has removed all the contingencies
Mhm.
and ready to close escrow, but the seller said that, well, I'm not gonna close escrow because of unforeseeable event that happened.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna cancel the escrow. Now, doesn't he need to specify what kind of unforeseeable event? It
He
depends on
does, yeah.
what it is, right? And he cannot
Yes.
say categorically that
Right.
unforeseeable event, and he has the right to cancel escrow.
I mean, yes, you'd have to specify what the event is. I mean, is it, you know, so when could a seller lay in the transaction, kind of try to wiggle out of it? It's hard for the seller to do that legally.
Yeah.
Maybe if the seller had a contingency for a replacement property, the seller could get out. The seller could properly cancel at a later stage of the transaction, but that has to be in the purchase agreement. That has to be a term of the purchase agreement at the start. You can't be on day 28 of your 30-day escrow and be, you know, I'm not selling my house in Pasadena because I couldn't get my new house in Sherman Oaks. No, that had to be raised earlier and put into the contract as a seller replacement property contingency. You know, oh, I think I had that in a case where, oh, seller was elderly and she her children were moving her to assisted living, and then she did very poorly at the assisted living facility. Elderly person, you know, sad. We've all been through this, you know, with our parents, you know, moving them out of the house, and they're going to, you know, a home where they can get the help they need. So I think that was a case I had. Yeah, that was a house in Pasadena, and the seller, there was a problem at the assisted living facility, and for that reason she wanted to cancel. I mean, that seems more reasonable, but I think still, yeah, I got the case, so it did unfortunately go into a lawsuit for that reason. So, but she could have put it's like a replacement property. It's like a seller replacement property contingency. So you could put in the purchase agreement at the start, sale is contingent on seller moving into assisted living facility and, you know, residing there for, you know, 1 month. You could specify something like that. It's a form of a replacement property contingency. So then she passed away. Yeah, she passed away, and there were payments that were made to her estate, based on the idea that, yeah, I represent the listing agent, so based on the idea that she didn't really understand the contract that she was getting into. So, yeah. Okay, so buyer's cancellation. Well, why would a buyer want to cancel? Well, seller doesn't deliver disclosures. Seller does not allow proper access to the property. You know, this paragraph 14D in the purchase agreement says buyer's right to cancel. And I love this paragraph 14D3. Buyer right to cancel, buyer contingencies. Buyer may cancel this agreement by good faith exercise of any buyer contingency included in paragraph 8 or otherwise agreed, so long as that contingency has not already been removed in writing. I consider this the catch-all provision for a buyer to get out of the contract within the contingency period. Can a buyer just you're within a contingency period, there isn't really something that comes up in an inspection report, but can a buyer just change his mind? Well, they shouldn't, but they can. So this is what I would hang my hat on if the buyer just changes his mind. Some reason they just don't like something, or, I see that, a family disagreement. The people in the buyer's family, they can't agree on this house. So 14.3, good faith exercise of any contingency. So that's a catch-all where if the buyer just changes his mind during the contingency period, excuse me, they can, properly cancel the contract. Buyer's agent, you could say that they drove through the neighborhood again and something just didn't feel right to them. It doesn't have to be. I talk a lot about inspection reports. I talk a lot about mold. I talk a lot about cracks in the floor. Cancellation doesn't have to be something so specific. It doesn't have to be, I was walking through the bedroom and I saw a crack in the floor and that looks like a structural problem for me. Sure, that's a ground for cancellation, but I drove through the neighborhood again and I just didn't have a good feeling about it. That's still a basis for cancellation. That's still a basis for cancellation under paragraph 14, and your buyer can cancel based on those grounds. And cancellation of the contract. Is the cancellation of the contract the residential purchase agreement? This is on my outline at the bottom of page 4 for everyone online. So if you're canceling this contract, does that also cancel escrow? No, it does not. It is separate. And the contract can be canceled. A contract can be canceled mutually by agreement of seller and buyer, or it can be canceled unilaterally just by one. But escrow only is canceled mutually. Why? Because escrow is a neutral party. They only act pursuant to mutual agreed to signed instructions. So there is the cancellation form, which I brought with me here. If anyone wants to look at it after I finish up, you can see it. Hopefully you already have seen it. It's the cancellation of contract, and at the bottom half is cancellation of escrow. And seller and buyer need to mutually cancel escrow. Now, this is where you get into the situation of the deposit. That's really what comes to be the sticking point. What happens with the deposit? Unfortunately, because escrow is a neutral party, if you don't have signature of buyer and seller, they're required to hold on to the deposit. So that's again where it's good to have a legal basis for the positions you're taking. Keep a good relationship with the agent on the other side. So hopefully when that 50,000 is still in escrow and your buyer wants to get it back, your seller will sign that. I mean, keep in mind, of course, just the other details, there can be deductions from that. Escrow doesn't work for free, so they have an escrow fee. There could be, a notary fee, maybe some extra fee for an inspection. So that $50,000 deposit, let's say you get back 47,000 of it, something like that. Okay, and then another important thing in the purchase agreement, it's kind of a detail. We don't think of it that much, but again, I've had a case about it. And what's included in the sale? That's paragraph 9. Items included in the sale is also under that paragraph 3. Let me find okay, so it's under 3P1 of the purchase agreement and paragraph 9, items included in the sale. So you go to this beautiful house and you see that, during the showing, of course it looks beautiful. It has these lights across the backyard. It has this smart home system. It has these really nice security cameras all around the property. It has the Tesla charger in the garage. You're like, great. I don't even need to have the electrician come out to plug in my charger. It's there already. But then you move in and you find 30 days, 40 days later, you move in, all those beautiful lights across the backyard are gone. The security camera, wherever there's security cameras, there's a hole in the wall now. And that Tesla charger, where that was in the garage, there's also just a hole in the wall where the Tesla charger was. But I thought I was paying for that as part of the sale. Are those items included in the sale? Well, to be on the safe side, if your buyer wants to see those when he takes possession of the property, you need to check the box. in 9A, there's a box that says electric car charging system. There's a box that says security camera equipment. There's even it even has an additional item included. So I tie that into the verification of property inspection. You know, you're close to the end. You're 5 days, you're six days before, 5 days before. Transaction's gonna close. You tell your client, it looked great when we did the home inspection. I'm actually going to Cancun next week. I don't really think we need to do a verification of property inspection. No, please don't do that. So tell your buyer, you know, it's a good idea to walk through again once before we close escrow. Just take a look at the property. Yeah, I mean, you do happen to, if you really can't be there, have another agent in your office attend for you. But the verification of property condition, and remember, there's a form that goes with it, and that it just helps the closing go smoothly, and it presents the situation where, you know, when the buyers, their first day to move in, they're so happy, but the security system and the charging station for the car have been removed. And the final point in my outline on closing issues, yeah, remember verification of property condition, the specific form, 5 days before closing. The other form to keep in mind for, you know, a detail for closing smoothly, and especially if you're the listing agent representing the seller, maybe they need more time to clean out the house. Maybe it's that situation where they are moving mom or dad out of the house. Mom or dad have lived there for 30 years, and now they're moving them into the assisted living facility. And they've been, you know, keeping all the family mementos there forever. They're not going to be able to move out by the date of close of escrow. So they want a lease back. They can do a lease back. You know, usually you don't even have to pay for those if it's a short one, but just don't where your seller is still in possession after escrow and there's nothing to document that they're there lawfully. So there's a lease back form. Just keep in mind there's one form if it's 30 days or more, and there's a different form if it's less than 30 days. And so those are the basics of the residential purchase agreement. If you have any questions, please let me know. Anyone online has a question, or anyone who's
Attorney Jeffrey. Attorney Jeffrey, I have a questions.
excuse me with this lingering cough I have. But
yeah, I have a just quick question. So the cancellation of contract with the buyer, what form do we use?
So if you're a buyer and you want to cancel, you know, like for example, your seller hasn't given the disclosure, you first given notice the seller to perform, and say on there that, you know, specify what contingency or what hasn't been done that the seller needs to do. You have to wait at least 2 days, and then there's a cancellation. There's a CAR form, cancellation of contract, disposition of deposit, and cancellation of escrow. And in that situation, you can do it as a one-sided unilateral cancellation because the seller hasn't performed. So if you've given that notice to perform, buyer, you can call it off. You can use the cancellation form. There's a form. I mean, if you want to, I can email you the number of the form, but there is a cancellation of contract form. So
yeah, because I'm asking this because if the cancellation reason is not if the cancellation reason is not on the contingency, just for something reason that as you stated, you know, the buyer have, you know, per that paragraph. So I just want to know that kind of form, the card form.
right. Well, yeah, I mean, so think about what is the basis for the cancellation?
Correct.
You know, maybe it's something in an inspection, but you know, maybe it's just your buyer drove through again and has a bad feeling about the property. So, you know, if you're within your contingency period, it's clear that the buyer can cancel. You know, possibly it's that the buyer, the lender is taking more time, or well, that would be an extension situation, but your lender turns you down. You know, that is a basis for cancellation under the loan contingency. And, you know, remember, you can, I mean, cancellation is your buyer's decision, but you know, it may be proper to discuss with your buyer, well, is there something else we can ask the seller to do? Do we need more time? Would just an extension of these contract periods be appropriate? So
Yeah, can you? Mhm.
I have comment on regarding the excluded and included items.
yeah,
When in doubt, please specify clearly.
exactly. Yeah,
Otherwise,
when
you know, because that can be some misunderstanding. I have a case that there's some misunderstanding regarding the statues. That, yeah, there was two very nice statues, and the buyer thought that it's fixed, it should be remain in the purchase agreement, but the seller said that, well, it's detachable. And you know, after they close the escrow, it's the seller try to remove those two statues. And there was a
Right.
big dispute, and then
Yeah.
we ended up in a lawsuit, you know?
right. So when in doubt, specify it in the purchase agreement. And there's on page 3, there's some boxes for that in the new residential purchase agreement. Yes. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
We train to try to get receipts on pertaining to a seller's gonna make the repairs, right?
Okay.
And you know, that can get kind of weird because, oh, you didn't do it right or whatever. How do we protect ourselves as agents? Do we just say, give us the receipts of the parts and the material? And, you know, that's how we train people to get all the receipts that they have for those seller required repairs per contract or anything
I
else?
think that's right. So, you know, during escrow, you're requiring seller to make some repairs.
Yeah,
You should, it's reasonable and it's appropriate, and it protects you to say, you know, give me documentation that confirms that those repairs have been made. You know, send me an invoice from the plumber that shows that the work was done. You know, send me, you know, an invoice from the termite company that shows that, you know, there was, you know, fumigation, something like that. So to just get an email or a text from the listing agent that it's done.
Yeah.
You know, yes, the leak is taken care of. That isn't the best for you. Yeah, you should say, you know, would you please give me some kind of document that shows it's been done? Or you could even say, hey, would you take a photo of that area and send it to me? My buyer really wants to see that this has been done. Yeah.
and if the seller does it themselves and they just have a bunch of Home Depot receipts for the material, you should still get those? correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
So,
all
yeah.
right.
Yeah, I think those are reasonable. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, depending on the scope and depending on the amount of the repair, you know, you're gonna, you know, press them more for receipts on a, you know, a leak that flooded half the house, you know, depending on the severity of the issue. Anything else from anyone online or from anyone here?
Yeah, Brian, this is Doug Meyer from the Arcadia office.
Hi, Doug.
Great presentation. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Is there any way we can get a copy of your note points here?
Yeah,
For-
so I'm gonna email it to Peter, and Peter today will email it to everyone. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, there is an outline, just about 5 pages here with bullet points. Not everything I've said, but bullet point summary. You'll get that today. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Very
Thank
welcome.
you. There's a couple of questions on the chat.
Oh, okay. I didn't see those, but let me get those. Okay, in the chat. Let me see. So there's one, I think it's from Mary.
That's me.
And so a contingency removal, I mean, it should be transmitted to the other side, you know, by email, you know, on the day it's due. I mean, there isn't, unless the contract says otherwise, it's not a 5 p.m. cutoff. But, you know, I mean, so sending it the next day, that's really not timely. So it needs to be on the day it's due. I mean, again, you're working well with, build a good relationship with the other side. You send it the next day. Hopefully that's not a big deal, but to abide by the contract, it needs to be on the day it's due.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm reading
And-
the next one. Demand to close. Let's see. Demand to close. That's a good question. I know for the notice to perform, you'd have to do it 2 days but for the demand to close, I want to check that, in the contract. It may be the 2 days again, but I'd have to just check the contract to be sure if you can serve it within 1 day or if it's the 2-day period. You don't have to wait 10 days, but the exact days, let me look at the contract here. Let's see if it says it. Somehow I'm not remembering exactly if it's 1 or 2 days right now. Okay, so yeah, just taking a look at the contract, and this is in 14 G, as in George, demand to close escrow. It says that the demand to close has to give 3 days to close. So if you send your demand to close, you're not required to wait 10 days, but don't serve it. And then the next day, don't serve it and wait 24 hours and then, and so the notice, you give the notice to perform, but the demand to close, you have to give them 3 days to close.
Okay, okay. So under the first question that I had, the removal of contingencies on a certain date, which actually I have that situation right now where the contingency removal is due today, 7/17. I've given them a couple of extensions already. If they come back and say, well, the lender isn't ready to commit to the loan documents, what is the seller's position? I mean, the seller actually wants to close this deal and has been very generous with time extensions for them, and would prefer not to do a notice to perform. Can we give a few more days without jeopardizing the seller's position?
Well, okay, let me be sure I understand your question. So you're the listing agent,
Yes,
and if this relates to the loan contingency,
correct.
and you've already given extensions for the loan contingency, right?
Yes,
And it's due today.
yes,
Okay, so, I mean, it's due today. You can give a notice to perform if it doesn't come in today. But you're saying your seller sounds like they don't want to play too hardball. They
correct,
do want to make this deal work.
correct.
And then, I mean, are the buyers, appear legitimate, like they're
Yes,
trying
it
to
does,
get the
it
loan?
does. And the bank has been requesting a lot of weird things, and we've been the buyer has been complying. We've been actually helping them to comply, so they should have everything they need. We just don't know that the bank is ready to send loan documents to escrow.
And your prior extensions for the buyer, you've given previous extensions of the loan contingency to the buyer. How long were they?
Uh, the first one was, let's see here. It was extended to July 8th, and now it was extended to today, the 17th.
Yeah.
So they've been
So-
substantial days.
Okay, so my thoughts are, it's really your seller's decision, so don't make
Okay.
the decision yourself.
Okay,
So present this to your seller, so your
Mhm.
seller makes the decision if they want to give another extension. Do it in writing.
Okay.
Because, if you just grant the extension yourself without checking with your seller,
Right,
your buyer, another 2 weeks later, they still don't have a loan. Your seller could be upset. Your seller could say, well, why did you give that extension? I mean, the fundamental ideas here are that you represent your seller. So it is your seller's decision whether
got
to
it,
give the
got
extension.
it. But,
It's not your call.
right,
So, I mean, you can give some advice, but it is your seller's decision whether to give the extension or not. And
okay,
communicate this to your seller in writing. So tell them what's going on in an email and get their position back in an email. So,
perfect, okay.
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that seller's not being jeopardized by not, taking action on the, because they're not performing on the due date.
Yeah, so then maybe if you send an email to your seller and they then call you and you talk about it, and then they say, yeah, okay, let's give them another 10 days because they seem legit and I do want to sell this house, then, after you talk with them, say the next morning, send it, or, sometime after you talk with them, a few hours later or the next morning, send them an email saying, hi, Joe and Mary. I just wanted to confirm that per our discussion yesterday, you're agreeing to give the seller another extension to their contingency of, 10 days. So the guiding principles are it's the seller's decision, and your communications with them have to be in writing.
Very good, thank you.
Another alternative, Brian, is to say to the buyer, saying that if you want some extension, give me some money and release it to the seller, and it can be applicable to the purchase price if it goes as sold.
It could be, yeah. That's another way of doing it, and I mean, all these things. So this would be your third extension that you've given. That would seem, that is reasonable. So I'd get less inclined to give these extensions, after a third extension, or maybe you
Correct.
do want then some form of a, something for your seller, like an early release of funds.
Okay,
So,
okay, thank you.
yeah, no problem. Anything else from anyone?
There's one more.
Oh, okay. Think. Oh, I'll put my email address in the chat because someone said, can I contact you with questions? So contact Peter's a good person, of course, to contact Peter, of course, with your questions, but you're welcome to. I've had sometimes the agents contact me, and you can do that. Anything else? Oh, is there?
Yeah, Kathy.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I didn't see. Oh, Kathy. Okay, so if the agent is not here. The agent is not a CRR member. Well, I mean, the agent has to function under a broker, and all the brokers are CAR members. So I don't see any transactions where they're not on a CAR form. So regardless of whether an agent is a member of the CAR or any other association, I would insist on the the CAR residential purchase agreement. Kathy, does that answer your question? And it's the CAR form is used not because of someone is a member of this organization. It's used because it's really a good form because it's drafted by CAR and CAR's attorneys, and it's drafted in a fair manner for both sides. So that's the reason it's drafted in a clear manner and a fair manner for buyer and seller and for the agents. And that's the reason to use the CAR form. So, yeah.
Because they're commercial real estate, they can use the AI.
Exactly, yes. Now, if you're talking commercial, yes, that's a different situation, yeah.
Attorney Smith, Attorney Smith, Jeffrey, great information. Great. Just one last questions from Jeffrey. Based on the paragraph 8 on the buyer may cancel this agreement. So I understand on this one that not just to perform, the buyer will not breach any contract if he will cancel the contract before the removal of any contingency in writing, right? He will not be on breach of contract, correct?
I couldn't hear it all clearly, and it was a lot of information. So you're talking about a buyer's agent, right?
Correct. Buyer's agent, the paragraph 8. I just want to be sure that there's no breach of contract if he will make a cancellation of the contract on any reason at all before the before the removal of the contingency in writing. We're not in breach of contract, correct?
I mean,
based on that paragraph 8, because looks like there is, as your explanation, there's a wide range of reason.
Within the contingency period, there's a broad right for the buyer to cancel the contract. Yeah. And it's a proper cancellation.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. Anyone?
Okay.
So, yeah.
Is that all the questions from the audience?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone so much for being with us. And it's really, really enjoyable to provide these seminars for you. So I hope I'll come back again soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. It's very enlightening seminar.
Great.
Appreciate it very
Thank you,
much.
Peter.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We can
All right. Oh, we gotta stop. We'll stop the recording.
Yeah.
Stop recording.